Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Welcome, everybody, to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Our goal is to explore the most important fundraising topics to help you reach your full potential as a leader and a development professional. Whether you're frontline staff, chief advancement officer, or CEO, fundraising is most likely a part of your responsibility and your influence. And today's conversation focuses on how to cultivate sophisticated donors. And we're joined by someone uniquely qualified to discuss it. Jocelyn Tetel has been with the Skirball Cultural Center for 29 years. And before entering nonprofit fundraising, spent a number of years in the insurance industry. Her path into advancement was not traditional, yet it has given her a distinct edge in understanding complex relationships and cultivating those sophisticated donors. Welcome to the show, Jocelyn. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Chris. I'm honored to be included today and invited to be here with you.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because it's so important to fundraisers. And so 29 years with the Skirball, that's a long time. And I understand how one would commit so many years to an organization, especially one that is as complex and interesting and sophisticated as the Skirball. But you probably have your own reasons for spending 29 years at the same institution. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was about the Skirball? I mean, what is the Skirball and what is it about the Skirball Cultural Center that has kept you around for 29 years?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that, Chris, because it is, as each year goes by, I do realize how unusual it is to have been in this role for 29 years. I have not met a lot of colleagues that have had that sustaining ability in their organizations, especially when a main responsibility has been fundraising. We see so many of our colleagues hopping around, and that's a whole other topic for one of your podcasts, I'm sure. I was really fortunate to be hired by the founder, and that's, a privilege and a unique opportunity. And I never hesitate to let people know, no, I was not there from the beginning. The Skirball is 30 years being open to the public, but it was 15 years in the making. And all that he did to create the vision, create the mission, find the land, find the architect, raise millions of dollars, get this place built, get this place open, get the first year operating budget in place, and have it be open for a year. And then I joined, having made this unique transition out of the insurance business, and knowing at that time, especially where people were with their careers, you generally we're sticking around. I'd been at the previous employer for 11 years, so I had hoped for a long path. But it's been just amazing to be here at the Skirball. It really is a unique place. We are the largest Jewish cultural center in the country. That did not happen overnight. 3 additional building phases were implemented under the leadership of the founder, and I was able to be here and help with that, and to continue to deepen the mission. The mission is devoted to the Jewish tradition of welcoming the stranger. And when I heard that, in those interviews 29 years ago, it had a lot of meaning for me. But today it's even more meaningful every day. considering what's going on in our world. And everything we do here is really connected to Jewish values, such as showing kindness, honoring memory. And of course, these are all universal values as well. But it's been just a wonderful learning curve for me, for my own personal growth. I am Jewish and came to this institution not as knowledgeable about my own heritage and culture. And it's been wonderful to learn about it, and equally as wonderful to share it with others. I think too, for being a museum, there's always something new. There's always a new exhibition. There's always a new program series. There's always a new initiative. And I am constantly learning and have the joy of taking what I learn and sharing it with others. And I come back to, something we talk about a lot is having that connection and passion for the mission and the work. And I think that has really helped to keep me here those 29 years, along with a lot of admiration for the founder, huge amount of admiration for the next CEO who is with us today. The founder was Uri Hersher. Today's CEO is Jessie Kornberg. She's doing a magnificent job, has really left her own mark and creativity, and building her own legacy with the institution as well. And I work with really dynamic, smart people that keep me on my toes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been easy to be here 29 years, which is unusual.
Yeah, well, as easy as any job is in the fundraising world, I suppose, which they're all hard. But you named so many amazing elements that I think most fundraisers and nonprofit leaders are looking for in terms of their own experience. And not everyone finds it. And so you've been very blessed to be able to be at a place that offers so many wonderful rewards to you personally and professionally. So congratulations. Prospective donors and donors are becoming increasingly sophisticated with all of the tools at their disposal. And so I'm looking to jump into this conversation. But before we do, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a little bit better. You spent so many years before transitioning into fundraising in the insurance industry. And I wanted to start with kind of a question like, what prompted for you that move, that transition into fundraising?
Sure. Thank you for asking. I was with two excellent companies in the insurance industry. First at Chubb Life in New Hampshire, and then I was hired by Johnson and Higgins, which had their corporate headquarters in New York. They were the largest privately owned insurance brokerage firm, and they moved me from New Hampshire to Los Angeles almost 40 years ago. And I went to work in their LA office, second largest office that they had around the world. I was in Century City. I came here knowing nobody and had never lived in a big city and did not know LA that well. About a year into it, I learned they are an incredible corporate citizen. They really believed in giving back in the community. A lot of their executives served on boards. They encouraged their staff to be out in the community volunteering. And after about a year of living here, I realized everybody in my network was in the insurance industry, and that was a little boring to me. So I ended up getting involved in the community and doing volunteer work, being fully supported by them. And as my sales skills in the insurance business started to grow and develop, and I was responsible for working with middle market sized companies, working with their founders, their owners, their executive teams, and growing the business that we had with them, mainly in Los Angeles. A couple were in other places. I was getting more and more involved in the community and doing volunteer work and finding my way onto a couple boards. And in that board work, I found I gravitated toward fundraising. And after about 10 years of being at Johnson and Higgins and doing this, realizing I was at one of the best of the best, I felt that there was still something missing from my career. And I actually went on a vacation by myself, did a little bit of that soul searching, and the light bulb went off that as my sales skills were increasing and improving, in the work I was doing with clients at Johnson and Higgins, I was getting more and more involved in raising money for these organizations where I served on the board and I cared deeply about them. And the light bulb went off that it was a similar skill set, but that I was more gratified when I was raising money for those
Mhm.
nonprofits. So I came back from that trip and decided to transition my career into nonprofit fundraising. I reworked my resume. I quietly reached out to different people in the community. And from the time that I made that decision until the time I got my first job in nonprofit fundraising was a full year.
Okay.
So I didn't take that journey lightly, and
Right.
I knew that if I was going to leave Johnson and Higgins, it better be for something good because I was with a fantastic company. Happy to tell you more about that year, but I ended up landing at the Skirball. So the Skirball is my first job in nonprofit fundraising. I've been here for 29 years, and the founder took a risk in hiring me because I hadn't done this for a living. I
Sure.
took a risk in taking the job,
Mhm.
for all of those same reasons, and leaving, a lot of financial security too, by leaving the insurance business. But I would say that it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, it's
And,
gone
and
extraordinarily
no,
well.
and no regrets, no
Good.
regrets.
That's great. I'd be interested to know what skills you did bring or that you thought you were bringing with you that translated extremely well.
Yeah, I think the real nugget there that the founder saw was my ability to really know how to manage relationships and know how to steward the process.
Mm,
So if it's a sales relationship or if it's a fundraising relationship, to really understand all those different steps of the process from opening the door to cultivating that relationship and to closing the door. So that whole process, that I had that skill set, it was proven. I was doing it um, as a paid employee in the insurance industry, and I was doing it as a volunteer in the work I was doing on various boards, and beginning to raise some money for them. I think that was really key. That he knew that I had that as well. He knew that I wasn't afraid to ask, and he had done an incredible job in raising money for this institution, but he knew there was more funding out there and needed somebody else who was able to do the ask, not just pick up from him, but to go out and open new doors. So I think those were the two. And I had 7 interviews. This job did not come to me overnight. It was a longer process. And and I was thrilled with that because we really got to know each other well. I
nice.
knew what I was stepping into, and he had a good sense of what he was bringing on board and hiring me. And lots of reference checks. I met with a number of people on their team, on the Skirball team, to include board members before they hired me.
Yeah, that's a wonderful. Sounds like a great process, and they were lucky to find you and lucky to get
Mm.
you for sure. Um, Obviously, you brought a lot of skills and that translated well. Were there some areas that you found harder in terms of that shift from for-profit or insurance sales to kind of fundraising?
Yeah, there were probably, well, I can a lucrative expense account.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one to shift
The
away from,
dinners,
right?
the
You were,
tickets,
yeah, that's
in,
right.
invited in the
The
insurance
entertainment
company
budget was not
box
quite the
to,
same.
yeah, not the same, not the same. But uh, I did miss that. But then as I got to know the Skirball, and I realized, well, you can't put a price tag on what I get to be surrounded by here, and how I get to feed my soul with the art and the culture that I get surrounded
Yeah.
by every day. And of course, you can make my own way, into some of those other things. The other that I struggled with, and why it took a minute, was when I thought about leaving the client relationships I had. I mean, literally, Chris, there were a couple times I started to cry. Like,
Yeah.
I questioned whether I should leave, these incredible relationships that I'd helped establish for Johnson and Higgins. And in weighing that through that year and making the decision to accept this job, one of the beautiful things that came out of it was how many of the clients that I had in the insurance industry I was able to connect to the Skirball. So not all those relationships had to leave my network. I mean, they don't need to leave your network if you know how to keep friends, but it's also always hard to maintain all of them. And it was really wonderful that I got to continue to literally work with some of those same people.
Yeah, that's great. I know that there were advantages that your business background offered you in this new role that you were taking on, and maybe in answering the question about what nonprofit leaders might miss when they only hire candidates with traditional development
Mm.
resumes, you can kind of help me understand what those intangibles or skills and talents were that you brought that maybe, again, nonprofit leaders miss today when they're hiring.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to think about that because when you look at a company, and I had something interesting happen. Johnson and Higgins was privately owned. They were a phenomenal company, treated their staff well, provided a lot of training, had great relationships with their clients. They were really known to be about the relationship as well, had a huge amount of expertise and knowledge. A couple weeks before I gave notice, and I was pretty close to the final offer, the company merged with a larger public insurance brokerage firm. And it almost was this great sign that I might be leaving at the right time, and who would have known that would happen. But I look back on the training that I got at Johnson and Higgins, what these big companies and having literally entire training departments, and particularly for sales, and not just the internal training where I learned, how Johnson and Higgins manages a client relationship, but they could afford some of that external training as well. And some of our nonprofits, especially smaller ones, just don't have the budgets to offer that kind of uh, training in any way, shape, or form. And often they don't have the depth to do it. So it's not that I came here and I had a bunch of senior people that were master fundraisers that could teach me how to do this. I had the founder who was an incredible mentor and an incredible teacher, and I built a network to learn from as well. But that, the Skirball couldn't provide me with that kind of training. I had to figure that out on my own. And I was always grateful because the training that I got at Johnson and Higgins, I could apply to what I was doing, right? Because it was about the sales process. It was about learning how to talk to people with different personality styles. I also was invited. You may recall during the 80s and 90s, there was something called quality initiatives going on in major companies, and I was invited to be on that team and was able to go into other offices and implement the quality initiatives. So I was getting training experience, which I think can translate to when you work in a museum and you're giving people tours. What's the best way to convey what it is that I want to convey, and share that with them. The quality initiative work, I think throughout, there were common threads of how do you ask questions? How are you a good listener? And, I came with a lot of that great training. So I'm really proud of the Skirball. We recently instituted a professional development day. And that's a huge investment in the staff. And we literally closed to the public. and that every staff member is given that opportunity to be here and be offered some unique professional development, classes and networking and hanging out with colleagues that you don't normally get to see during your workday. And I thought that was a really brilliant move on our CEO's part to do that and to make that investment. But it's not offering fundraising and sales training, through that. You still have to go get that somewhere else because we just don't have enough people here to warrant that.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you described some of the characteristics or qualities or things you learned prior to jumping into this particular arena that were important. The ability to ask the right questions and develop relationships is super. I'm wondering if there are other traits that you think are maybe more important than fundraising experience per se when you're looking at hiring for a development position.
Corporations are doing a better job of offering mentoring experiences within their corporations, and grateful to have had that with people that were salespeople. So I could really learn from them and what they had experienced in being at the time older and having more years of experience with it.
That's
I
great.
think some traits for advancement leaders to look for today in hiring for their teams is first and foremost a passion for the mission.
Okay.
And if they don't have that during the interview, if they're not able to articulate their own personal interest in the mission, if they're not able to share it with a passion, it's not that they need to be an expert at it, but that interest and that level of passion should be there, because you certainly can teach some details, but I think it's hard to teach that passion, coming from the heart, and that care. Also, a difference is in many companies, you're given a job and your job has a pretty clear path. In the nonprofit world, you're often asked to be in a certain position, have key responsibilities, but you are all the time being asked to wear different hats. And you need to be able to have that flexibility to do that. So in fundraising, if you're putting on a donor cultivation event, I may be the one moving the table, moving the chairs where they need to be, getting the supplies ready. Whereas, in the corporation, when I organized a seminar, there was other staff doing that work, right? So just that flexibility to be able to wear more hats. Another is, this isn't true for all nonprofits, but so true for many of us, is that ability to face the public and to have a lot of interaction with the public. So when you look at the Skirball, which is a cultural center and a museum, we're about to have a big puppet festival day on Sunday. We're going to have over 1,000 people here. You never know who's going to walk up and come in the front door. You never know what they've experienced in their day, what they're bringing in with them. And that ability to greet and manage a diverse public, I think, is really helpful, that you don't always get in some jobs coming out of business. So when I see that someone has worked at Starbucks, I think that's fantastic training.
Right.
It really helps provide that if they've done a good stint at Starbucks and had a happy ending there, that they're probably coming with exactly that kind of training, and just that customer service, especially when it's a front-facing organization such as the Skirball. I know there's some that maybe don't have those same elements as a nonprofit, but I think those are things that we don't always get taught in our day to day in a business community
That's for
as
sure.
well. Yeah. And just, public speaking skills, writing skills, and phone skills. I think that in the field of fundraising, those really can serve you well. And it breaks my heart when I see some of the deterioration in writing skills because everyone is so used to quick texts and short
Yeah.
emails.
Right.
Um, and I'm still, I mean, this may be very old school, but I'm still a believer in writing that personal acknowledgement letter when
Yeah.
someone has given a donation and having it sound as genuine as possible.
That's great.
Having clear speaking skills when you're on the phone, because often that first contact may be that cold call, and so really understanding what good phone skills are, I think is also necessary. And you never know when you're going to be in a circumstance where you get to speak about the work you do, whether it's at a cocktail party or literally to an audience or something like this. But to have to have those developed, many businesses will teach that to their staff.
Yeah.
And I know I did some self-improvement outside of the job, to work on that as well. I think there are many ways you can gain those skills if they're not strong. But I think those are really important skills to bring.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is there a signal that tells you or tells someone that an individual or a candidate can cultivate major donors, even if they've never done it before? Are there secret sort of characteristics that lead you to believe that they're going to be okay in that arena?
Mm-hmm. Um, Speaking skills, again, just how is someone communicating with me in the process of an interview? Are they interrupting me?
Mm,
Are they losing eye contact with me? Are they not answering the question fully? Are they going off on some tangent? So just
exactly.
those conversation skills, those speaking skills are things that I look for, how they really manage the process of the conversation, how they speak about relationships in their own life. Uh, Someone who's done a lot of job hopping, someone who's um, doesn't seem to have much of a social life. How do they speak about their family? How do they speak about their friends? I think you can pick up a lot about that. Where does their skills lie in relationship building? And are they doing any community work? So not necessarily fundraising, but do they care enough about the community around them that they are volunteering somewhere or they've ever volunteered somewhere? And are they, if they are they doing anything that might gravitate toward fundraising? Are they
Mhm.
the volunteer at the gala? Are they selling tickets to the sponsorship? Little things like that that you can pick up, that they're already starting to show some of those skills.
Yeah, that's great. Interestingly, both of us had our start outside of the nonprofit sector. You were in insurance sales. I was in financial advisory work. Now, you spent
Mhm.
more time in insurance than I did in my financial advisory work, but in both, I think they were experiences that allowed us to understand sort of the business world, for me, the markets, customer service, obviously, just like you, and sales and all of that stuff. And the last kind of question I wanted to ask just about the background that you brought with you is about financial literacy.
Mm,
As I think back to my experience, one thing that really helped me was being able to talk to wealthy people and not be scared because
Native.
I was comfortable with at that point with people that had money and wealth, and it wasn't foreign to me anymore. And secondly, I understood kind of how the economic world worked better and the products that kind of moved the world, right? And so I guess the question is like, how important is financial literacy in the world of fundraising, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Um, I think it's extremely important to be comfortable speaking about it. I don't think you have to be an expert, but you have to know how to manage questions when you don't know the answers and still show that confidence. Something that I see in a lot of what I'll call junior fundraising professionals is that they don't have the confidence to speak about their organization's budget and what the fundraising needs are.
Right.
And, there's nothing to be ashamed of, right?
Right.
The Skirball Cultural Center has a budget of $37 million, and we need to raise $10 million of that every year through direct fundraising work. Uh, Put it out there, be comfortable with those numbers, know how to speak about them, know where it is that you need to raise the dollars. What are the other sources of income? And to really get that down in a language that you're comfortable with. So I think the confidence part and understanding how to speak about a budget is important. The other side of it is knowing how to speak about income and expenses, to know both sides of the ledger with a
Mm.
budget,
Right.
and not just know what it is that we need to raise, but know what it is that we spend and how we spend it.
Yeah.
Um, if there's an endowment, when you step into the nonprofit world, there's some new language to learn.
Hmm.
I relied a lot on Chronicle of Philanthropy.
Yeah.
It was a great teaching tool. There were a couple of classes that can be helpful. To understand what an endowment is, to understand what a reserve is, to understand how your organization uses that money if they exist. And if they don't exist, what does that mean to your organization? So that when
Yeah.
a donor is asking, do you have an endowment? Do you have a reserve? And the answer is no, to know how to speak to that and what it means about the stability of the organization.
Right. Or if there is an endowment, to know how much there is and what's in it. Is it a bunch of restricted funds that perhaps that person could add to and contribute to the endowment, or is it just one big general pot? Who manages it? All of those kinds of things. So that's
Yeah.
wonderful. You bring that up because far too people are capable of reading a 990 or reading the financials of their organization, understanding them, and for the most part, they're all publicly available and kind of interesting too. Like how many of the people that work in development have actually read the audits of uh, of the organizations that they work for. Very few, I bet, in development have read those audits. So,
And I was going to say, I also think a good development person is building the team they need in the organization. So I don't feel I need to be an expert on how to interpret our audit or our 990, but I better have a great relationship with our CFO or controller so that when those more detailed questions are asked, I can easily get them answered and know that they're accurate, as well as with the CEO. So when a sophisticated donor asks those more detailed questions, I may not have that answer immediately,
yeah,
but I've got a good relationship with someone that understands the urgency of why we need to figure this answer out or do a report to help demonstrate whatever it is the donor is asking about. And that, my colleagues or the colleagues of a development department understand, why those questions might be asked and why they need to be ready to answer them and work as a team. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, all of this is leading really nicely into our conversation about cultivating sophisticated donors. So let's jump into that more fully. And let's just start with kind of a definition or understanding of what all of this means. When you say sophisticated donor, what do you mean? Is it wealth? Is it experience? Is it expectations? Is it strategic thinking? How do you think about the phrase sophisticated donor?
It can, Chris, I think it can mean a lot of things, and I, love your interpretation of it as well. I think what immediately comes to mind is someone who has had a lot of experience giving away a lot of money.
Good.
So, it doesn't matter what age they are, but they've been a philanthropist. They're giving it away at very high levels. They're, giving it away where they're signing a lot of gift agreements. That can define a sophisticated donor. But I also think you can have someone who's younger, you can have someone who's less experienced, because they grew up with it. It was talked about at the dinner table. At an early age, their parents brought them into the family philanthropy, and maybe they're just beginning to be on their own and making decisions and being given aspects of, with their own bucket of money from the family foundation to give away. And they haven't had that much experience, but they certainly come with a wealth of knowledge, and many of them are able to give it away at very high levels. So yeah, I'm seeing many ways a sophisticated donor could be defined. And then of course it's the donor who has put their name on a lot of things. And
Mhm.
we know that they've given away at high levels. Naming is important to them. They probably have a team of lawyers looking at gift agreements all the time. And that, I think, is sort of the uber sophisticated donor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is very difficult to have one definition of a sophisticated donor. And um, I think about this in so many different ways. Like a sophisticated donor is one that's not easy to impress, that they have had that experience. As you mentioned, they probably have lots of resources and advisors telling them maybe how to interpret what you're sharing with them or how they should be involved. So just a lot of different ways. And then I think too about this idea of sort of the sophisticated donors are more investors instead of being more in the transactional mode
Yeah.
of an organization. And is that true? That's kind of the question that I have. Like, are these sophisticated donors, from your perspective, less transactional? And if so, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing in many different ways. There's some, particularly in this town, there's some wonderful philanthropists that give away at high levels, and they are like, "I love what you do. Please just send me a simple letter," and the check arrives,
Yeah.
and they're not that involved.
Hmm.
They really just believe in the mission. They see it in action, but they're giving it a high level, and
Yeah.
they've been doing it for years, across town.
And you love them.
And we love them. We love them. I often talk about it, the difference of a philanthropist versus a consumer. And a consumer often will be that more transactional donor. I want to give you this much. What are you going to give me for it?
Right.
How big is my name going to be? And will it be in the most visible spot in this institution?
Right.
And doesn't mean that we don't want to have a relationship with that donor.
And you don't appreciate it or you're judging that. That is just,
Yeah,
it is what it is. You,
it it's what they are, and the institution has to decide, is this what we want? We're also seeing more and more donors. I use the phrase donors that dictate.
Interesting.
Donors that want to come in and I have a musician that I want you to present, and I want to be the person that runs the tech for them when they're doing their performance. They want to come in and help hands-on. And
Wow.
some of our nonprofits need that kind of help from donors. They don't
Okay.
have the staff. They can, like, oh my God, this person's going to give us $100,000 and do that. It's fantastic. And
Right.
others are, well, we've got experts here. We know what we're doing. We don't want
That's
your
right.
hands in it.
That's right.
So it's institutionally, I see donors getting engaged at very deep levels. Sometimes it's very welcome in some institutions, and in others, it isn't. So they can certainly be considered sophisticated donors as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's the kind of move toward venture philanthropy among some,
Mhm.
where there's a measurement of impact or return and
Yeah,
a relationship over time. So that
yeah.
adds a level of complexity to a sophisticated donor that has to be accommodated by many nonprofit leaders as well.
Yeah, in the museum world, that I think has always been a bit of a challenge. If I'm going to give a hospital $1 million to bolster the work that they're doing with heart patients, they can probably measure, what they were able to serve more patients, they were able
Right.
to, you know, help people overcome the disease. They can have a lot of statistics to measure that impact. Museums are more anecdotal. We'd like to have $1 million to help us bring this incredible exhibition. How do you test what people learn from it? You can look at the numbers. Well, your money helped bring in 100,000 people to see this exhibition, which shared this beautiful message. But you can't always say, of the 100,000 people that came to see the exhibit, 50,000 learned this, and they went and changed their lives, and they did this, and they, so that measuring that impact, as you said, it has become more and more important to many donors, and they may not always find the connection they're looking for in some nonprofits because they just can't create that kind of impact or measurement. The tools aren't there.
If you were to think about the profile of your sophisticated donor, knowing that donors come in all shapes and sizes and ages and everything else. But if you were thinking about kind of the profile of a sophisticated donor, what comes to mind?
There are two. One is someone that did grow up with it, and there was talk around the dinner table. That's how they learn. They learned from their parents, their grandparents, their second, third generation. The other is where it's new money. To them, they earn their own money. They built something to create that money, and they like using that money to help someone else or another organization build something to improve the world. So I'm seeing both of those types of characteristics. In general, those people tend to have a really strong right hand as an assistant that is very familiar with what they're doing in that space, maybe some other family members. But the other thing that they often have is a philanthropy advisor
Mm.
and a partner in that thought process, that strategic thinking, helping them find uh, different ways to invest their money philanthropically. Uh, so many of them seem to have that support to help them be more sophisticated. So, you can look around LA and think about some of the bigger names here. We have quite a few sophisticated donors in LA. And if you notice, I have not been naming names. we have quite a few of them, and I think a lot of
Sure.
them, if you would agree, fall into one of those two definitions, and with that support system.
You've worked with sophisticated donors now for 29 years, and um, yet over those 29 years, what qualifies as sophistication, I imagine, has changed dramatically. I've certainly, in my 30 years in philanthropy, seen a marked change in how donors respond to organizations, to asks, to everything. And you named part of the challenge or the opportunity here is that they're getting professional help, these philanthropic advisors. There's a lot more due diligence, if you will, a lot more knowledge than there was before about the inner workings of the organization, maybe a lot more engagement in an organization before you end up becoming a big donor. But I just wanted to kind of get a sense from you how you've seen working with these sophisticated donors change over the years. What are those different ways that it's changed?
Yeah. And when I look back at the 29 years, I have not been working with sophisticated donors all 29 years. When I came in, I was really helping build the base of donors,
Okay.
letting the founder, wanting the founder to work with the most significant ones. But I helped make sure we had a great depth of types of donors and donors at different levels. And being able to hear from him some of the stories, what the meetings were like in working with a variety of sophisticated donors that helped build the Skirball, and then help contributed to it after. And then as my experience built, I had an opportunity to work with some of those sophisticated donors. And it's interesting. And again, I think for a whole other topic is how development departments are organized and how they work with the CEO. And it comes in all shapes and sizes. But I think the biggest difference that I see, to answer your question specifically, is the level of engagement that the donor wants with the institution. And having that more hands-on and wanting to be in the weeds in program planning and where's the impact, learning about that. That I'm seeing more and more donors care about that. And I think a challenge in an organization when you may not want your donors that engaged and involved is how do you manage that, keeping them a little bit outside the organization, but helping them feel like, and in many ways they still are, contributing in some ways, but they don't have a desk here. They're not getting the insurance of the nonprofit, right? And keeping that separation of state and church, so to speak. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Brilliant, brilliant. Exactly. Have you found certain consistent characteristics that seem to frustrate sophisticated donors with certain nonprofits? Are there certain things that
Mm.
do or certain things that are just more likely to frustrate uh, a sophisticated donor? And I ask because we're obviously trying to coach and train and educate other fundraisers about things to avoid as much as we are to do. So what are you not supposed to do with these sophisticated donors?
Well, I think my gut response to that, I bring it back to relationship management. Um, if you're a parent and you ask your teenager to be home by 5, you expect them to be home by 5.
Mhm.
So if I say to a donor, I'm going to get you that report by Friday, I better get the donor that report by Friday, or I better
Mhm.
have a really good reason. So just how, if I'm going to, Chris, I can't wait to go to lunch with you. I'm going to call you tomorrow to set up a date. And I don't call you tomorrow to set that date. I'm not being very responsive. I'm not being a good person in that relationship management. So I think just being genuine about what you say you're going to do it.
There.
And to me, that sounds so simple and basic because I'm so relationship oriented, but I have heard it from so many other donors that, we're not going to give money to that institution anymore because they never send reports, they don't send them on time. They say they want to meet with us, they don't schedule the meeting. So to me, that's sort of very basic relationship management. But I'm
Right.
hearing that some nonprofit colleagues are not adhering to it.
Right.
I think there's a lack of, especially some of our smaller nonprofits, just a lack of efficiency and processes that you can't turn things around as quickly. So it's
Good.
creating those expectations. So if a donor is asking for a particular kind of financial report, but you know that your CFO or controller has never run that report before, don't say you'll get it tomorrow because you probably might need 2 weeks for your controller or try, to figure out how to do it and make sure it's accurate. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of, knowing how to be responsive and genuine and accurate, and knowing that lack of efficiency can be frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem to me also the failure to communicate properly,
Mhm.
well, to also maybe have the relationship feel like you're only interested in the money, where every time you have a conversation with them, it's about an ask, it's about a gift.
Mhm. Mhm.
It fails to um, have that stewardship element to
Right.
it and relationship element. It's just always about the money, right? And failing to acknowledge properly their support. Just how have you forgotten to thank the donor appropriately, right? Like unfortunately, that is just something that too commonly happens where you take the gift for granted, you don't adequately thank them or acknowledge it appropriately, or you overpromise how you're going to offer that recognition or gratitude and you fail to deliver, right? So just to your point, basic stuff that
Yeah.
seems to fall through the cracks.
Yeah, yeah, you've heard a donor say, "Oh my gosh, you just call me," and you brought this point up, and it's a really good one. You just call me once a year, and I haven't heard from you.
Hmm.
Any other time. It is figuring out what are the tools and the assets that you have. Are you going to set up a schedule that you call the donor once a quarter, but you don't make it look too like, oh, it's the third Friday and I'm calling.
That's right.
It has to look very natural, but you're making sure you're doing those touch points, and are you using the communication tools? Again, with our arts and culture organizations, we often have beautiful program guides or magazine, and ways that our institution is touching that donor, even though I haven't been in touch with them. But something beautiful arrived in their mailbox, or a well-written email sharing news coming up, and just making sure you're using those resources that you have and working with your colleagues to develop those materials when they're needed, and then remembering to truly have that personal touch through the year in whatever ways may work for them. And even if you don't get a lot of response, you know hey Bob, I haven't seen you in a while and I thought you'd really appreciate this exhibit that we just opened. Can you stop by for a cup of coffee? I'd love to share it with you. Not interested, but at least the touch was there.
There you
you
go.
know Remembering them, keeping it personal, making whatever that connection is. Yeah.
So important. I've often taught people that sophisticated donors have the same heart, maybe even a bigger heart, than most individuals, that these philanthropists are big-hearted people. But oftentimes, because they're so sophisticated, their protection mechanisms of that heart are stronger. There's a lock and key around that heart that is hard to penetrate. And what have you found? Is it better preparation? Is it access? Is it, well, I mean, what is it that maybe helps unlock that heart more
Mm.
strongly?
Well, a couple things come to mind. One is doing your best to get to know a little bit more about their world. So if they are a working professional and there's an assistant, and particularly if that assistant has been there a long time, that assistant can be very helpful in the relationship. And you've got to really work on establishing your own friendship and relationship just with that assistant. Again, having the benefit of working in a cultural institution, inviting that assistant to come see the exhibit that they might be interested in as our guest, giving them the
Right.
tickets, so that assistant is going to have much more enthusiasm when saying, "Hey, Jocelyn called and she would really like to schedule coffee with you. And she's doing some really interesting work. Let's find the time
Yeah.
to, that assistant can find ways to help you." And then it's being alert. Many will take time or may never share a lot of personal information, but are they in business? Are you seeing their name in the news? Is it positive? Is it negative? How are you in touch with them about that? Have you gotten to know their family? Did you know that they just went on like the biggest vacation that they've ever been on in their lives? And are you following up to ask how it went? So just making those notes about their, what's going on in their worlds and being alert to it and showing interest that has nothing to do with whatever the organization is that you're representing, and remembering to do those touch points in that communication.
Yeah, that's great. That's such helpful advice about the assistant. I have found that to be a golden ticket so
Mm-hmm.
many times, so many times. And the more sophisticated the donor, oftentimes the more individuals exist in their world to support their work
Mm-hmm.
that can positively
Absolutely.
their engagement. So, especially when we're talking about family offices too, as well. So, um, I had a question that I was interested in asking about engaging sophisticated donors intellectually. Is there an element
Mhm.
to that, a need to engage these
Yeah.
sophisticated intellectually? How so?
I'll personalize it to the work, that we've done at the Skirball. Uh, Often donors really appreciate being able to meet the artist, being able to meet the performer, having maybe time alone, having a few minutes. They appreciate the behind the scenes, seeing an exhibition, an installation, to see how it comes to life. Maybe there's decisions that need to be made about how a project is getting developed, and often a donor can be helpful. They have the knowledge. They like being asked. I think it's a delicate step that needs to be taken there. Um, you're not gonna, if you work for a medical organization and you're saving lives, you're not gonna have the donor come in and do the surgery. But the donor may actually enjoy getting to know the doctors that are employed, observing from a distance. That behind the scene approach can mean a lot to some donors. But you have to be careful of that fine line of letting a donor dictate. But engaging intellectually in how a program or a service got developed, and especially during the time that it may be in development. Some of our donors can really add some important aspects to it and important intellectual property of their own, and feel good that they're able to contribute that way, or to make certain introductions. Um, The flip side of that is when you ask somebody for their input or their opinion and you don't use it, that can be harmful. So knowing how to navigate that delicate balance is important too.
Yeah, I love the point you're making about access, intellectual or otherwise, how important it is to um, give the individual experiences that are meaningful and special to them. I think that's one of the great opportunities organizations like yours have to properly cultivate a sophisticated donor. How do you know when it's right to move beyond the cultivation phase and into the solicitation phase with these sophisticated donors? Are there certain signals that you look for?
I don't think there's a immediately right answer because each person, and again, I come back to, understanding relationships, each person and each relationship is going to be different.
Yeah.
So I think it can be helpful early in the process to let them know that you hope they'll want to become more engaged with the institution. You hope that they'll want to make an investment in the institution and that you're looking forward to introducing them. So even at the beginning of the conversation, you're planting that seed in a very subtle way. You may not ask them again in that same meeting, but the seed has been planted. Um, I think it's an instinct that I have not been able to articulate to know exactly when that right moment is. It's just something that you have to feel. And, you don't always get it right.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't always
I'm
get it
sure.
right. And you also have to be able to handle the rejection.
Hmm.
And you also, I think, need to know that sometimes saying no now doesn't mean they're saying no forever.
Hmm. Hmm.
And how do you sustain that relationship? I think cultivating a donor too long can be a mistake.
Good.
You know, uh, you, the opportunity will move on by. Uh,
Right.
so timing is an issue, but I don't have a concrete answer to that question. Do you? What's your experience been with it?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you're constantly trying to find opportunities to present ideas, investable ideas that might excite the prospective donor, and they're going to bite on certain things that you share with them, a level of excitement around an exhibit, for example, or a capital need, an endowment need, a programmatic need, a staff person, or something, right? So you're constantly talking about the organization and what's going on and certain elements, and then inviting the question, kind of, is this something that you might be interested in learning more about or potentially funding or something like that? And so I think those signals maybe give you a little bit of an opening to when it's appropriate to um, present a proposal or present an ask. But I loved your point about the dangers of sort of over cultivating. I think you're always cultivating, right? For hopefully as long as you're in a relationship with them, you're cultivating them. But then every once in a while, there comes a time where you have to ask, and hopefully you are knowing them, knowing what interests them, they're aware of
Mhm.
what the pain points are, maybe of the organization, and when the money is really needed for something, and when they can be the hero, and when they want to do it because it makes strategic sense to their sort of philosophy of giving and
Right.
impact. So it isn't a right or wrong answer. It's a feel. It's you doing your work in terms of cultivating, getting to know them, probably opens up more doors.
And also knowing some donors are going to start with smaller gifts and how you acknowledge that, you know, that that I think is really important. When you have a donor that you know can give a lot of money and they only give a smaller gift, if you're not still showing that same level of gratitude, because you know you're going to be asking again, and hopefully
Yeah.
you're building upon that relationship. That that's important. to know, how to manage that for yourself.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. And the first one is, what do you think executive leaders need to understand about cultivating sophisticated donors? Is there a lesson there for the organizational leadership?
They really need to understand relationship management and to not be afraid to ask and to know how to set the stage in the room. We're seeing some institutions run by executive directors that don't know how to fundraise and don't want to fundraise. So how do they learn to work with their development people to form a good team? How do they work to, are there board members that can help them do that? Are there ways they can build those skills? And the other is how, if you want to build a culture of philanthropy within your organization and you've got an executive leadership group, are other people responsible, even though their day-to-day job responsibility isn't about raising money, but helping them understand where their role is and how they need to be responsive to the department executive, because information often needs to come quickly and can be last minute and can be very frustrating. So, making sure your entire executive team has some decent understanding of the donor cultivation process, even though they may not have that direct responsibility for it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right, so as we wrap up, I'd love for you just to share your best advice with those folks out there that are listening who are working with sophisticated donors. What advice would you give them to always keep in mind? And it could be reframing what we've already talked about or something new, but what's your advice to folks as they continue to work with or begin to work with sophisticated donors? What's the best thing that they should be thinking about doing?
A couple things come to mind, Chris. One is a new relationship often doesn't happen overnight.
Beautiful.
So you gotta, that timing issue though, right? We already said it's an instinct. You don't always know, there's no formula of when to ask, but it's looking at that arc of the relationship development and realizing that maybe some time needs to be invested in it, and to be aware of what else is going on in that person's life and trying to figure that out, whether they're giving you that information directly, what you read about them, who knows them, really using all of your resources to be helpful to that, I think is one thing that's important to understand. But then that other side, don't wait too long.
Right, right.
Yeah. So it, it you know, sometimes you just got to go with your gut, and to also realize that if someone says no, if they have the capacity, if they're showing an interest in the mission and the work, to understand why they said no now, and can we keep the door open, and then keep the door open.
Right.
Don't just come back a year from now and think they're going to be different. You've got to keep working on cultivating that relationship.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's perfect. And I also find too that when these sophisticated donors do make a gift, they become more invested. And
Absolutely.
And it just provides a great opportunity for you to build on that with additional opportunities for them to get more engaged with the mission, more engaged with you in a personal relationship. So, um, Jocelyn, I'm just so grateful for you sharing both your journey with us and your wisdom with us, especially in this arena of cultivating sophisticated donors. Your experience reminds us that fundraising excellence is not about where you start, but about how you build relationships with professionalism, with discipline, and with authenticity. I want to thank our listeners for joining us today for this episode of Mastering Fundraising. I would encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast, as well as our other podcast, Lead for Good and the Nonprofit Edge. In each of these, we really get to the heart of certain issues around nonprofit leadership, and at the same time, learn from these extraordinary individuals like Jocelyn. We're committed to helping the nonprofit community strengthen their ability to be strategic and impactful leaders. And until next time, we just would invite each and every one of you to continue what you can do to lead for good. Thanks all.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.